Let's go today. Inspire your troops today. Inspire your troops today.
If you guys want to be remembered forever, this is how you do it.
All right. We win the game. This is a legendary defense. Put an exclamation point on your work.
It's over, folks. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won the Super Bowl for a sixth-time unprecedented.
It's time now for Black and Gold Central Radio, exclusively on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Let's get those terrible towels waving. And now your host, Mark Batista.
Hello there. Welcome to Black and Gold Central Radio here on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. It is Friday, July 5th, 2013. I'm your host, Mark Batista. Pittsburgh Steelers training camp begins in exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today, so get your beach days in now. Now, hopefully Steelers fans celebrated the 4th of July yesterday by watching the America's Game marathon on the NFL Network. All six Steelers America's Game shows were aired on the NFL Network yesterday. I didn't have a chance to watch them, but I have them all on my DVR, so I'm very happy about that. Please, no spoilers. I don't know how they end. A couple of things that we need to get, that I would like to get to today. We're going to... Ben Roethlisberger was in London this week to promote the Steelers game against the Minnesota Vikings in London, which is on September 29th. I'm going to talk about the issue of an NFL franchise possibly moving to London and my alternative. We'll definitely talk about that today, and if we have time, we'll also finish my projected 53-man roster for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last week I did the offense. This week I can do the defense if there's time. Now, as I said, Ben Roethlisberger was in London this week. He had his picture taken with the original Big Ben, the big clock tower in the background. And he was there to promote the Steelers-Vikings regular season game, which will be played in London at Wembley Stadium on September 29th. That's going to be week 4 of the NFL regular season. Now, NFL games, the NFL has been playing one regular... This is going to be, by the way, the Steelers have played preseason games overseas before, but this is going to be the Steelers' first regular season game overseas that counts. This is going to be their first game outside of the United States that counts in the standings, and will go down in history. Now, the NFL has been playing regular season games in London one a year since 2007. And I'm kind of surprised that with the ready-made Big Ben story angle, Big Ben the quarterback, Big Ben the clock, surprised with that story angle, I'm surprised it's taken this long for the NFL to jump on that and schedule the Steelers in London. But now technically, this is a Vikings home game. The Steelers have 8 games at Heinz Field and 8 road games, and this game in London counts as a road game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But really, who is the NFL kidding? I have a feeling that terrible towels are going to be taking over Wembley Stadium on September 29th. Now, because Steelers fans tend to take over a lot of visiting stadiums in the United States, and I have a feeling it's going to be the same dynamic over in London. So, if that's the case, it means that the Steelers really only have 7 games this year instead of 8 in supposed hostile territory. So this is something that could work a little bit to the Steelers' advantage. It's almost like having an extra home game in a way, if it plays out the way I think it's going to play out, in with Steelers fans pretty much dominating Wembley Stadium. I could be wrong, but it just seems that the Steelers have more of a reach outside of their home market than than the Minnesota Vikings do. And it goes back to the Steelers winning 4 Super Bowls in the 70s. That's what happens when you win 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, as opposed to losing 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, which is what the Minnesota Vikings did. So it came in London, could be a little hidden advantage the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. But having said all that, while I don't mind a couple of games a year in London, and this is actually going to be the first year that they play a second regular season game in London. Jacksonville Jaguars play the San Francisco 49ers there in October. I don't mind 1 or 2 regular season games a year in London, but I am dead set against having an NFL franchise in London. Now, it doesn't seem that it would, I don't understand how it would work out logistically. There's a kind of equilibrium and logistical symmetry to the NFL that I think is one of the reasons that contributes to the competitive balance that has made the NFL the most popular sports organization in North America. You have 32 teams split into 8 14 divisions, and you have a scheduling formula that guarantees that each team will see all the other teams at least once every 4 years. Now, how do you maintain that balance when you have an ocean separating one team from the other 31? There have been a couple of articles on this. One of them by Jason LaCanfora of CBSSports.com, and he talked about, in an article on June 5th, exactly 1 month ago, on CBSSports.com, and he pretty much said it's not a matter of if an NFL franchise is going to move to London, but when. So he said it could be within the next 5 to 10 years, and that it could be the Jacksonville Jaguars appear to be the leading candidate. And in that article, LaCanfora, he addressed a lot of the logistical hurdles that would come up when if an NFL team was in London. The NFL, or that London team, could take 2-week trips to the United States and play their road games in 2-week blocks to lessen the amount of times that they're flying back and forth. They could set up offices in a camp practice facility in the United States, and that he also said that visiting teams could establish a camp in England when they go on road games out there. So but the one thing that article on CBSSports.com didn't address was how an NFL team in London, how having an NFL team in London would work during the playoffs. Now, I wrote an article that I published yesterday on Steeler Addicts about the whole London issue, and how I'm against it. But one of the things I talked about was, let's say the Jacksonville Jaguars were the team that ended up moving to London, and they're called the London Jaguars. Theoretically, you'd think maybe the Miami Dolphins would move to the AFC South, and that the London Jaguars would be part of the AFC East. You'd have an AFC, the Dolphins are, Miami is South, and Miami would be in a division with Houston and Tennessee. And then you'd have the AFC East with New England, New York, Buffalo, and London. Because London, I think you could say that they're to the east. They'd be the easternmost franchise in the NFL. Okay, so let's just say that that's the case, that you have the London Jaguars in the AFC East. And one good idea that Roger Goodell has had, moving a team to London would not be a good idea in my opinion, but one good thing that he did was requiring division games to be played in the last week of the regular season in the NFL, because that reduces the risk of meaningless games and teams who have already clinched playoff spots, really not needing to win. So that's a good thing that Roger Goodell did. And if there was a team in London, and say the New York Jets had to play that AFC East game in Week 17 and they had to go to London, let's say, so they fly out to London for Week 17, Then let's say they have to go to San Diego for a wild card if they made the playoffs. Let's say that they, and I'm just using the Jets as an example, obviously. Let's say they play that regular season finale out in London. Then the following week they got to fly out to San Diego to play the Chargers in a wild card game. And they win that, and then they fly all the way back to London for the AFC divisional playoff game. And let's just say the London Jaguars, the hypothetical London Jaguars, went 14-2 and they've earned a first round bye in the playoffs. So you've got the Jets flying from London back home to New York, back to San Diego, back home to New York, and then back to London, all within 14 days. And then they're playing a playoff game against a team that hasn't left home in 3 weeks. I mean, tell me that doesn't put a team at a competitive disadvantage. And that's the kind of stuff, those are the kinds of things that you got to think about if you move a team in London. Even if the Jets had another camp in London, even if the Jets had a place in London where they could practice, they'd still be going back and forth pretty much within a 14-day time frame. Okay, so that's just, just one example, and there's so many logistical things that would need to be worked out if you put an NFL team in London. So, I mean, and what would be some of the solutions to this? Let's say these hypothetical London Jaguars are 14-2 and they've earned home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Would they be forced to stay stateside and play in instead of having to go to the instead of having to travel to a team with an inferior record? Maybe you play games at neutral sites. So what, you have maybe the Steelers playing at London in a playoff game at Gillette Stadium? It just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem right. And that's the kind of thing that happens when you try to fix what isn't broken. Okay? Having 32 franchises split into 18 divisions with the schedule formula and the playoff system you have now, it's one thing about the NFL that's not broken. Roger Goodell is trying to tinker with it. Now, I know athletes in other sports play overseas all the time. Okay, but for example, the tennis tours, the professional tennis tours, have been in Europe since about April. They play overseas because that's when the tour is out there. Most professional tennis players have been in Europe for the last 2 or 3 months. It doesn't work that way with football. You're in one city 1 week, you're in another city another week. Now, and another little thing about the NFL is, I think another reason why it's so popular in North America compared to the other major sports at this point is because it's still a league, unlike other leagues, where small markets can thrive. Green Bay, I mean, there are teams and cities, there are very viable franchises in cities like Green Bay, Buffalo, even though Buffalo has, played a lot of regular season games in Canada. But you got teams in Green Bay, Buffalo, Nashville, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh, for that matter. You have a small market. There's a small market presence. You have a small market presence in the NFL, and to me, putting a team in London sort of abandons that. Okay, and it also just doesn't seem right to me that the NFL is trying to go international like this when there are problems right here at home that need to be fixed, without getting too much into recent events in the NFL. Let's just say that there are problems with player behavior in the NFL. And there are problems with player safety. Not that the NFL isn't trying to address these problems. They are. The NFL is definitely working on these problems. But here we are, and some people are saying the NFL might not even be around in 20 years because of the concussion issue. Some people are saying the NFL won't be around. The NFL's days are numbered. The NFL might not have much of a future. That it could be, it could become like boxing because of this current issue. So some people are saying the NFL won't be around in 20 years. Meanwhile, the NFL's trying to go global. They're trying to go international. Let's try to fix what's broken here at home before we go global with the NFL. Now that we've established, I think I've made it clear that I am against having an NFL team in London. Here's my solution. Here's my alternative. My idea is for every team in the NFL to play one game a year in London, one regular season game per year in London. Now, you might need a second or two to kind of roll that around, to wrap your head around that a little bit. But every team plays a Thursday night game now in the NFL. All 32 teams play at least one Thursday night game in the NFL. If a team plays 2 Thursday night games, that's because the first one is in week 1, where you don't have to worry about a short week. But Thursday night games don't seem too popular among the players. But that's the way the league is now, and so every team has to deal with one Thursday night game. And in a way, that sort of levels the playing field because every team has to deal with one short week. And so if every team has to deal with the inconvenience of a Thursday game, make every team deal with the inconvenience of one regular season game in London. Now, Roger Goodell says that fans in Europe really want more NFL. I'm not sure if I agree with Goodell. According to Ray Fittipaldo of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, when Ben Roethlisberger went over to London this week, soccer, Wimbledon, and cricket got more coverage in British newspapers than Ben Roethlisberger's visit. So, that kind of gives you an idea of, how excited they are about having an NFL game in London. Just keep that in your mind. Just keep that in mind, the sort of coverage this promotional visit got. So, but if Roger Goodell's right, and they really want more NFL out in London, then having one game there almost every week during the regular season would be a good way to appease those fans, I think. They'd have almost a full NFL schedule in London. It wouldn't be one team, but it would be every team. Fantasy football players would love it. You get a chance to see every player at least once. If you have a favorite fantasy player, whenever his team's playing, you live in London, you buy tickets. You have a chance to see any player you want. So, and the way they work it with these Thursday night games is that they stop the Thursday night games on week 14. We could stop, you could play the London regular season games through week 14 or 15. That way you prevent teams, if it's week 16 or 17 and you're fighting to get into the playoffs and every game is huge, you don't have to worry about flying out to London in week 16 or week 17, which a team might have to do if there was an NFL franchise there. Don't underestimate the toll travel can take, on a team. So say we have NFL regular season games in London in week 14, up until week 14 or 15. You could have double headers earlier in the season to ensure that there are 16 London games. Maybe in early December, you have a London doubleheader with a game on a Saturday and a Sunday. Sometimes the NFL schedules games on Saturday in December when there isn't college football to compete with anymore. So maybe that last week of London games, you could culminate it with a doubleheader. One game Saturday, one game Sunday. Or maybe you could have a Sunday doubleheader with a game at 9:30 a.m., which is 2:30 p.m. over in London, and then your normal 1 o'clock start. You probably need two separate stadiums for that. So maybe the Saturday-Sunday doubleheader in December would be a good way as a finale, to have a finale for the London series for that season. And I know, having a 9:30 a.m. game in London, that 9:30 a.m. over here, that would kind of break the tradition of your football Sunday starting at 1 o'clock. But I think it's better. I think you'd be breaking tradition a lot more if you have a London team overseas. If you have one franchise in England and the other 31 here in the United States. And I would even be willing, not only would I be willing to have 16 regular season games a year in London, with each team playing once, I would also be willing to give London a Super Bowl. Again, this is another idea that you might need a couple of seconds to wrap your head around. But I think you would need a much longer time to wrap your head around having a team in London. Now, the Super Bowl is a homegrown American holiday. Let's not deny it. The Super Bowl is a national holiday now. But it's something that's really uniquely American. And it would seem blasphemous to have the showpiece event of this American national holiday played in another country. However, I would be okay with it. I would be okay with giving London a Super Bowl if that's the compromise needed to keep the NFL from moving a team there. Say London gets a Super Bowl every 5 years. They get 16 regular season games. They're part of the Super Bowl rotation. I think that's enough. That's enough football. That's enough NFL for London. They don't need a team there. And there could be issues with security out there in London too. That's something to think about. So you would really seriously need to beef up security. They did have the Olympics out there, but this is something really American. So that might be something that you really need to pause before doing. But those 16, just think about having 16 games a year in London, and maybe spreading it around Europe too. Playing a game in Ireland or maybe Germany. But my point is, instead of having a team in London, one team in London, just have every team deal with one game a year there, and that way it keeps the playing field level. You keep a level playing field if each team only has to go out there once. So we'll see how this unfolds here. And the other thing about the Steelers, how this would relate to the Pittsburgh Steelers, because after all, this is a Steelers podcast. As long as they're playing one regular season game a year in London, the NFL is never going to ask the Steelers to give up a home game. They're not going to ask the Steelers to give up a game at Heinz Field to play in the one game a year one of the two games that they're playing in London, because the NFL isn't going to ask that of a pillar franchise in the league. The Patriots have played 2 games there since 2007, and they were technically the road team in both of those games. The New York Giants were technically the road game when they played the Miami Dolphins out there in 2007. So franchises like the Steelers, Patriots, and Giants, while it's good, the NFL, they're good franchises to have out there in London for the NFL to promote the game. The NFL isn't going to take away a game at their home stadium here. However, if they do play if the Steelers are playing one game a year in London, they might have to sacrifice one game at Heinz Field, maybe every other year. Okay. But again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the show. The Steelers fans, they have a following in Europe. The Steelers have a following all over the world, and they could probably, even for their supposed home games, even if they only get 7 games at Heinz Field, and one of those home in quotes games is out in London, it still would probably feel like a home game for them. And it'll be interesting to see when the Steelers play there in week 4, which will be September 29th. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, and we are kind of closing out. We only have a couple more minutes here to talk, and it looks like my my sermon about London would kind of takes us away from me getting to my 53-man roster here. We can get to that in our next show, or we could do it later in this show, but it looks like we're kind of running out of time here. But there is plenty to talk about between now and the start of training camp. We are working on getting the Ravens and the Browns podcasters from on Pro Football Central here as guests on this show. We talked to the Bengals last week. Sean O'Donnell does the Bengals podcast for Pro Football Central, and we're going to try to cover the rest of the AFC North before training camp begins. So for now, hopefully you're listening, Roger Goodell. Don't move a team to London. And I want to thank you for your time, Steelers listeners. You can follow Black and Gold Central on Twitter, BNG Central. Please give us a follow and let me know what you think about my revolutionary idea for the NFL in London. And you can follow me, Mike Batista, on Steel Tweets. That's Steel_tweets. And until next time, we'll be tuning in next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Actually, we're going to go back to our regular date for Thursday next week. But thank you for listening, and tune in again next week for what will be episode 6 of Black and Gold Central. Have a good day.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.